So for those of you who have been around for a while, you know I talk a lot about hydration. And hydration entails a couple of key different ways to support the body. It's not just about drinking more water. There's something about the quality of the water we drink. And so I'm not going to do that in this video, but it's important that the water that we drink is pure, it's structured, it's energized, it has minerals in it. So we do need to make sure we're drinking adequate amounts of water. We also have to make sure that our intracellular hydration, the hydration inside of the cells, is replete. And that's actually through a process called building EZ water or exclusion zone water. Again, I talk about that in a ton of videos as well. Spoiler alert, that does involve infrared light exposures. However, what about hydration in terms of using minerals, specifically a specific type of mineral that I love to have people use, mineral supplement called Quinton Isotonic marine plasma. For those of you who've never seen Kinton before, there's these little ampules, right? Literally, it's 10 milliliters, and it's a blend of ocean minerals. So it's going to provide approximately 78 different minerals and trace elements. It's full of phytonutrients and phytoplankton and things like that that come from a very pristine vortex ocean area off the coast of France. And so Kinton was originally discovered and developed and utilized therapeutically by a physician named Dr. René Quinton. What René Quinton realized was that the blend of these minerals and the nourishment that one gets when consuming this seawater, and it's diluted, right? It's in a diluted form. He realized that this actually is insanely nourishing for the bodies of people who are depleted. And it's hydrating as well. And so he used it extensively for people who were suffering from war wounds. He used it in animals who he found actually you could take the Quinton Isotonic and replace the blood volume, and these animals would continue to go on thriving. So it turns out that the body is really well adapted to absorbing and utilizing this diluted version of seawater. And in fact, it's almost an exact match to that of our blood volume in terms of the amount of water and mineral ratio balance. And it's almost an exact match to the water in our interstitial fluid or around our extracellular space. And also, it's almost an exact match to our cerebrospinal fluid. So what this means is that even though your clients would be consuming tiny little ampules, 10 milliliters at a time of this isotonic marine plasma, it actually has a high affinity for getting into the blood. And once the blood volume is adequately hydrated, it can then easily get into this interstitial space, this extracellular space, where it provides a very healthy terrain for allowing minerals to get into the cell and then waste to get out. So it's very hydrating in that space where our lymphatic system lives, where our immune system lives, where a lot of activity takes place, but where a lot of stagnation and toxicity can build up. And so, in terms of having clients rehydrate using Quinton Isotonic, I do this with clients who I suspect have a dehydrated blood volume. The work of a scientist called Dr. Botmangalij, what he found was that in people who are under either extreme amounts of stress or live in an inherently dehydrating environment, which would be those of us in a modern indoor office space even, or modern indoor home, because remember, indoor living depletes us of things like or indoor living is full of things like wireless radiation, which will inherently dehydrate us. It's full of the more dehydrating wavelengths of light, such as blue light, which inhibit our mitochondria from making adequate water for us. And so living indoors, working indoors, we're in an inherently depleting environment or dehydrating environment. And a lot of that happens through the blood volume. The blood volume, if it senses that there's dehydration, it says, okay, let's shut things down a little bit. And this is, again, Dr. Botmangalij's research. They basically said, okay, capillaries, we're not going to allow this beautiful hydrating nourishment from the blood and minerals from the blood out and into the intracellular space where it can facilitate nourishment of the cells and removal of wastes, except for maybe in the most critical parts of the body. What he found was that when that blood volume gets dehydrated, that the body turns on something called a drought management system. And believe it or not, that drought management system increases histamine levels in the body. And what am I seeing all the time in clinical practice? People who have mast cell activation, people who have histamine intolerances, massive triggers to environmental toxins, environmental allergies, allergens, triggers. And so to me, I started saying, wait a second, all of this histamine, all of these sensitivities, could it be that the vast majority of these people have dehydrated bodies and dehydrated blood volume, and so therefore are living in a baseline of excessive histamine production in the body? And sure enough, it turns out that this appears to be the case in clinical practice. So step one wasn't necessarily giving them tons of water to drink, or even building exclusion zone water. While those things do matter, we really wanted to focus on a therapeutic window of usage to rehydrate their blood volume and rehydrate the interstitial space, the extracellular matrix, where the immune system lives in the first place that causes the excessive histamine. And so I started having clients take Quinton Isotonic, typically 3 ampules on an empty stomach for a month, sometimes 2 months at a time. Yes, while doing the circadian supports. Yes, while building exclusion zone water, while grounding, while drinking appropriate amounts of water. But what I found was that this isotonic, when the blood volume was rehydrated, all of a sudden the immune system, the hyperreactivity, the symptoms one gets when there's excessive histamine degranulation can go down. And not only that, but all of a sudden now we have an open pathway for hydration coming from the blood, the capillaries, to bathe the interstitial space so that minerals and nourishment and hydration can get through and waste products can get eliminated. And so, again, this was through the use of this isotonic specifically to rehydrate the blood volume and to nourish the blood volume, which then eventually would nourish this interstitial space where so much activity takes place, but can become stagnant in those of us who are chronically unintentionally dehydrated. And so, a couple of ways to do this, to utilize it in clinical practice, would be 1 up to 3 ampules a day. So that's one ampule is 10 milliliters. So basically up to 60 milliliters of this a day for a therapeutic window of time. For some people, this therapeutic window is 3 weeks. For other people, they do have to go 1 month, 2 months or so in order to get that true hydration, depending on what their histamine burden is, how long they've been chronically unintentionally dehydrated, and what their current living and work environment is doing, either to support their hydration levels or to just kind of contribute to this ongoing dehydration. And so, the cool part about this is that, yes, it might be transiently a cost, right, to make sure we are able to consume this. But I find that once someone is rehydrated, they can then go into maintenance mode. That maintenance mode sometimes does mean 1 Quinton ampule first thing in the morning. For other people, it means maybe a couple of times a week or situationally. And one of the ways that we use this situationally, once there's rehydration that's taking place, is people find it very beneficial for regulating their autonomic nervous system. There is something about giving the blood nourishment in the form of hydration and minerals, and then therefore also bathing the extracellular fluid in this nourishment as well, that tells the autonomic nervous system that it's no longer in a status of threat. And instead, it can regulate itself and balance itself out in order to promote homeostasis homeostasis into healing, as opposed to staying on high alert danger mode. And so it's just a beautiful thing to have in your toolbox, either as a clinician or if you're going through your own health challenges, to rehydrate the blood volume like this, especially through the use of Quinton Isotonic. So I hope that helps. I hope you realize now that when we hydrate, it's just not just about the water that we drink. It's not just about building that exclusion zone water. Some of us really are lacking in this mineral nourishment that we can really get very easily through the use of Quinton ampules for a therapeutic window of time.